Hello and welcome all. Today we'll be creating the web API, actual web API with ASP.NET Core and MongoDB. This is the part 3, and in the part 1 and 2 we have laid the foundation for this particular tutorial. And in the first topic we have discussed what is a NoSQL database, non-relational database, as opposed to the SQL database, a relational database. And also we have discussed some principles of the MongoDB which we'll be using in this current project. And in the second part we have actually installed and configured the Mongo database environment and inserted 2 documents in the MongoDB collection, and we have also retrieved these 2 inserted documents. And if you haven't been to those 2 parts, please do go through them before coming to the part 3, because it is entirely based on the first 2 lectures. So today we will be creating the web API with ASP.NET Core and MongoDB. So if you go through this, we have to open the Visual Studio and go for new project. And in my case I have already got this recent project templates, so I'll just click on this recent project templates, clicking on the ASP.NET Core web applications, and I will create the web app with Books API as the project name. So Books API. Right, let me check the name, what it should be ideally. Yeah, it is Books API really. So Books API, so by default it's already highlighted with the ASP.NET Core 2.2 selected in the drop down with .NET Core, and API is highlighted. Just click on OK. Project is getting created. In the meantime, we'll go through the slideshow. So right click the project Books API and manage NuGet packages and browse for MongoDB.driver. Alright, so what I will do again, yeah, this is created for me. Right click on the Books API, click on manage NuGet packages. So I'll click on the browse and click right here MongoDB.driver. It's already selected. Yeah, so this is the latest stable version 2.90 beta 1. So I will install that. On the output screen you can see that it is getting installed. I'll accept the terms. Installing NuGet package, and it is successfully installed. Alright, so just click close. Next is add a models directory to the project root. Okay, so click on add, new folder, models, name it models, add a book class to the models directory and paste the code from the Microsoft documentation at the following URL. So if you browse this URL, it will go to this documentation. Okay, so we'll go for the adding a book class the book class is created for me. Now in this book class, I have already copied the code from the documentation. So I will just paste it. I'll just copy over the entire thing and just paste it to save time. All right, so this is my book class, public class book. So it uses the books API namespace, books API.models. Models is the folder, books API is the project. Now let's discuss these things a little bit. So in this class, this ID property is required for mapping the common language runtime object to the MongoDB collection, right? This is the ID property. It's for mapping purposes. Now this is also annotated with the bson ID to designate this property as the document's primary key. This is the primary key. And it is also annotated with bson representation bson type.object ID. What this means, it allows passing the parameter as type string, okay, instead of object ID. So that's why you can use the public property string instead of an object. So MongoDB handles the conversion from string to object ID. Other properties in the class are annotated with the bson element. This is bson element is annotating this other public properties. Now this attributes value represents the property name in the MongoDB collection, right? So we'll get back to work again. Getting back to the slide. Next we'll add a service directory to the project root. So again, add another folder. Call this folder service, and within this folder what we do is book service class to the models directory and paste the code from MS documentation. Okay, so add a book service class to the service directory. This is wrong actually. It's a typo, sorry. This should be the services directory which we have just created, right? And so getting back here, I'll create a book service class. So click add class, book service class, and on this book service class I will add the pre-copied code on my notepad and write it over. We'll just come to the explanation in a bit. So this is the book service class within the service folder, or rather this should be renamed as services. Okay. Now here we'll have to open the app settings.json. Can you guess it? What do we do here? Here you've correctly guessed, in an ASP.NET Core application we can create our connection string in the app settings.json. Now it already has something written, logging log level default, but we don't worry about that, and we'll copy it over with the code that I have already written on my, pasted on my clipboard. All right, so this is the connection strings is bookstore DB. That is the name of the connection string. If you are already familiar with the name attribute of any connection string, so here it is named as bookstore DB, which is on a default MongoDB port at 27017. It's the default port on the local server for the MongoDB. Right. Now this bookstore DB property is accessed in the book service class constructor. So if you go for the book service, so you can see the get database with the connections here. The client is new Mongo client, config is app settings.json file .get connection string bookstore DB. So this is the bookstore DB. This is what it is. Now next is we have already added the service directory and we have added the book service class. Next is we have also added the connection string to the app settings.json file. Now we have to register this book service class in the startup.configure services, right? This is a public method, configure services. If you have gone through my earlier lectures on ASP.NET Core Web API, so we have to register our services in this services directory to this method in order for it to take effect. So again, going back to the code, here it is on the startup.cs file, startup class, configure services. It has MVC is already added by default, and I'll have to add this book service. So got it all copied from the documentation, and so services.add scope book service, right? And why it is complaining? It have to get a namespace using books API.services, right? Because this is you have to import this book service.api. Now in this preceding service registration is necessary to support constructor injection in the consuming classes. The classes that will be consuming this configure services will need this constructor. Now this book service class uses the following MongoDB.driver members to perform CRUD operations. So if you go back again to the code here, so here a variable client is assigned new Mongo client, config.get connection string bookstore DB in this line. Okay, so Mongo client, what does it do? It reads the server instance for performing database operations. The constructor of this class is provided the MongoDB connection string like this. That is the MongoDB connection string bookstore DB. Okay. Now here get collection of type T, generic type T, which is in this case book, type book, it represents the collection name, and this is the CLR object or common language runtime object type stored in this collection. That is in this collection that we have made in the previous part 2, we have made a book collection. So it is of type book. That books collection is of type book, right? Now this get collection method, it returns a Mongo collection object representing the collection, and in this tutorial the following methods are invoked on the collection. We'll use a few methods which we will see in the forthcoming part. Find T, find of type T, it returns all the documents in the collection matching the provided search criteria. Then there is insert one. inserts the provided object as a new document in the collection. And then replace one method replaces the single document matching the provided search criteria with the provided object. And then there is a delete one, it deletes a single document matching the provided search criteria. Right. So next, let's see, all of these are in this, find. We have seen find, and we have seen insert one, we have seen replace one, and we have seen delete one. So insert one, replace one, and delete one, they insert, replace, and delete a single object as a new document in the collection, and whereas the insert in the update procedure, it replaces the single document matching the provided search criteria with the provided object, and in the remove it deletes a single document matching the provided search criteria. Next part will be adding a controller. So now add a books controller class to the controllers directory with the code from the following. Again from the MS documentation. So go back to the code, and controllers directory is already there by default. So I'll add a books controller. So add controller, empty controller, go for an empty, and then instead of the default, I'll make it books. So you can see that it is scaffolding, updating dependency information. Yeah, so again, I'll highlight the entire code and copy it over with the code available from the Microsoft documentation. Now, here, a few things require some explanation. Now, in the preceding Web API controller, it uses the book service class. Okay, it uses the book service class to perform CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete operation, and it contains action methods to support get, post, put, and delete HTTP requests. So it has got get, HTTP get, create, update, HTTP put. For create it is HTTP post, and delete, HTTP delete, HTTP request. Now created at root method, there is a created at root method. Created at root method. What it does, it returns a 201 response, which is the standard response for an HTTP post method that creates a new resource on the server. So because you are trying to create a new resource on the server, created at root also adds a location header to the response. The location header specifies the URI of the newly created to-do item. So it does two things. It returns a 201 response, which is the standard response for an HTTP post that creates a new resource on the server. After having created the new resource successfully, it returns a 201 response. And also it adds a location header to the response, which specifies the URI of the newly created to-do item. Okay, now we'll build and run the application. So Ctrl+Shift+B, combination again to build. Build started, build succeeded, and I will run the application. Ctrl F5, again the hotkey combination, Ctrl plus F5, and then I'll have to now browse to This is